Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And our guest today is, I'm very excited to have Cathleen Elle. She's a #1 international bestselling author, global transformational speaker, certified intuitive success coach, healer, and podcaster. Cathleen teaches how to revolutionize living through emotional, spiritual, and energetic processing. She's owned and operated several small businesses, was an elected legislator, also a successful executive and lobbyist. Her life works dramatically refocused in March 2010 after her son died by suicide. She became a certified success coach, a master RIM emotional processing facilitator, and now her life purpose is to educate, inspire, and empower those who have lost loved ones suddenly or unexpectedly. So, Cathleen, welcome to Talking with Teri.
Thank you, Teri, for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Yeah. So, for folks that don't know you quite yet, but they will, I want you to, share in your own words, how you came to be where you're at today.
Okay, so in 2010, as you mentioned, my son took his life. And when he took his life, he was angry at me and he wrote a note saying he didn't want me at his service. And so for 25 plus years of my professional life, I was a legislator. I served for the governor. I did lobbying and an executive. So I was a success in all terms of society's success.
Yeah.
And yet when my son took his life, it shattered me. It completely shattered me, so much so that I found myself lying upon his grave probably about 3 months after his transition. And I realized at that point, I was just screaming, begging, pleading, please, whoever, whatever took my son, take me too. I wanted to die. I didn't want to live anymore. And I heard this message out of nowhere. It's very, very clear from the infinite intelligence saying, if this happened in your life, then you're meant to do something with it. So now do it. So it was at that moment that I started to shift my perspective on why I was here, how I had to move through a healing journey versus a story of pain, and move through the healing of the traumatic loss. And also, as I moved through that healing journey, I also realized there was some unresolved trauma as a child that I never really dealt with, that was still blocking my heart and from serving my ultimate purpose.
Wow. Clearly you've done the work, right? Clearly you've done the work
Yes.
on this to be able to sit here today and talk about it in a way that, you come from a place of healing, because that is just unbelievable, right? Like just so heart-wrenching, so devastating, so traumatic on so many levels. I mean, we could just dive into that one element of it. But what you're saying is that that was part of this journey for you.
Yeah, it certainly was. I would never wish that my son wasn't here. Like every day I say, I would give my life for him to be able to grow old with his sister. And yet that's not a choice. So what is a choice for us as we move through any sudden change in our life, a job loss, a business closing, a divorce, whatever sudden loss that we go through, we can choose to stay stuck in that pain and regurgitate that negative victim mentality, or we can choose to step into our journey 1 hour at a time by moving through the pains that are stuck in our body. And what I teach people, what I talk about is we carry a story based on limited information. From
Yeah.
0 to 8 years old, we're taught how to respond to the rest of our life.
Yeah.
And until we know differently, until we become aware there's a different way of thinking and being and believing, we continue to re-victimize ourselves over and over and over again, not being aware of it. So what I help my clients is I help them move through some of those limiting stories and help them create a new story around that. I help them dissolve that within their body. We also carry, I could go on for hours about this. We also
Yeah.
carry trauma and limiting beliefs from our parents and our grandparents, and then our grandparents carry their parents and their grandparents. And so it's a
Exactly.
lineage of trauma that's stuck in our body, and our body talks to us.
Yeah.
So we can choose to ignore those pains in our body and become full of disease, or we can work through the difficult, challenging emotions that we try to avoid. So where we can feel lighter, more connected, more engaged in living a fulfilled, joyous life. Like that's really where I've become,
I love it.
where I've
And
come.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. You're right. Like you're talking, um, we're on the same wavelength, right?
Yeah.
We're both coming from this healing background, and like how do we help people come from this place of lack and this place of, whatever those stories are, because I think every one of our stories is different. And earlier today I was training a new staff member, and she's like, I got to know what your backstory is. And I was like, oh yes. Like, but
Interesting.
it was interesting that she wanted to hear that piece so that she could hear how I ended up where I'm at today, because she is going to be promoting my brand and promoting, what I do, as a broader perspective. And you're right. Like we all have that story. We all have
Mm-hmm.
that programming. And I think it's kind of our path and our journey, as you talked about, is like, okay, what is that? How is it serving me? Did it serve me? Because I think at some point it serves us, right? It serves us, and then it comes a point where it doesn't serve us, and it actually then holds us back, and and then we get to work. That's our process. That's our journey, is to overcome and understand and dig deeper into that personal work. So what was that journey like for you, digging deeper and truly because that's multiple layers, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
understanding. And again, we would never wish that upon anybody. But this was part of your path, and this was part
Yeah.
of the journey.
Yeah, my journey was challenging at first. I didn't step in knowing what I was doing. I just stepped in because I knew I had to continue to keep my son's name alive
Yeah.
and to find a purpose within this trauma, within this tragedy. Like I had to find, the pearl within the oyster, because what I was experiencing and living was so painful. I couldn't live like that.
Yeah.
And the journey was stepping forward three steps and falling back two. It wasn't a linear process. I think people are misinformed or have a limited belief about the grieving process. And again, that grieving process is global. So I'm just speaking globally,
Yeah.
that it's a linear process, that you go through your anger, you go through your depression, you go through your self-blame, you go through all the 6 stages of grief. Some say 5, 6 stages. I actually say 7, but that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
It ebbs and flows, and sometimes you're in just one of those emotions, other times it's all piled on, and sometimes it feels like you're sinking into that quicksand every movement that you make.
Yeah.
And as you continue to invest 1 hour at a time in your healing, whatever that may be, I went from a grief specialist to the cognitive thought therapist to post-traumatic stress therapy to energy healing to ayahuasca ceremonies to, like, I have explored RIM processes, um, personal development. I've gone through any way I can to move through that healing journey of
Yeah.
removing and dissolving those layers that have been protecting my heart for the 50 plus years of my life, and starting to open up to realize that the light that shines all around us actually shines within us, within me.
Yeah.
And as I started to remove the layers of pain my birth father was an abusive alcoholic and shot at us as a child.
Wow.
There was all kinds of turmoil around that. And I created a limited belief about that. So there's two things I want to say. I created a limited belief about that. When he shot at us, I was separated from my mother and sister because that was the safest place to put me. But the program I had was my mother and sister in the bathtub. I'm beside the toilet and the wall. Why am I not good enough or lovable enough to be in the bathtub with my mom and sister?
Yeah.
But the fact is, with the additional information that I know today, based on the healing journey I've been on, that was the safest place for me. And she did the best she could with the information she had. But as the 3-year-old little child creating this story, I created a life of multiple marriages, multiple relationships of I'm not worthy enough, so I better just take what I can get.
Yeah.
And that is not speaking ill of the people that I was with, because they were all very good beings. They just weren't right for me, but I
Yeah.
chose what I believed I deserved.
Right. And
Because
oftentimes,
I didn't believe I was lovable. Right.
yeah. And so that just reinforces it, right? We find
Right.
people that maybe are not emotionally available or can give what you need.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And because
Yeah.
we keep missing the mark and we start creating that from that previous programming. But I love how eloquently you've kind of spelled this out for a lot of people, because I think oftentimes we think about that, that first 8 years of life when consciousness is being created, right? And those programs are being programmed in there, and it takes other life experiences for us to shine light on those previous experiences. Say, okay, this
Right.
is the root. This is an element of this. And so a
Right.
lot of times, not that I want to take people back, right? But we want to string, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Anyway, propel ourselves forward.
Right.
But oftentimes when we go back, that allows ourselves to heal that part that needed healing, that allows ourselves to see the gift that we weren't able to see in that time, right? Because I think oftentimes that, it is that moment where we're being shown what we need to be shown at the time, right?
Right.
And then later, years later, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times in my personal life that I've like, oh, hello, like now I get that
Exactly.
vision, like we don't always get it right then and there, but like over time, it gets exposed to us. And I truly believe that it gets exposed to us when we can process it, when it makes sense, and when we can actually do something with it. And we can call it into our awareness to make those shifts. So whatever that looks like for you and our lives, right?
Which brings me back to the second point. Exactly. You led me right into the place where all of the experience I experienced as a child, whether it was physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, or feeling like I didn't have enough, all of those experiences propelled me so where it gave me enough strength and desire and drive to say, that's not the life I want to live. I want something more. I want something better. But it also gave me the strength to survive my son's suicide. Like, had I not experienced all of that trauma, all of that challenge
That just
throughout my
gave me chills,
earlier
by the way. It
years,
just gave me
right?
chills. Yeah.
There is the pearl within the oyster amongst all of that. Had I not experienced that, I would not be here today. Like, I would not have survived my son's suicide. I wouldn't have been able to have the strength to keep moving. And
Wow.
so I see all of my life as a blessing. Now, do I want to experience all that again? Absolutely not. That is definitely,
One was
and
good
that's
enough.
why, yeah, that's why I delved into the healing journey. So what's so critical, I think I would love your listener, our listener, the listener to listen to hear is that there's no avoiding it. You are
Yeah.
carrying it and you are responding to the things you're trying to forget. You're trying to not space. You're trying to pretend never happened. You are carrying it. You are still responding with that. And
Yeah.
until you face it and move through those emotions and release that, you're going to be carrying it and creating additional trauma from that trauma.
Beautifully said. Because I think when we're not being dealt with that, and not that, and there's been multiple times in my life where the rug, if you will, got pulled out from underneath me. And I'm like, whoa, was not expecting that one.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, crap, like I got to go back and like look at, what I was doing to help contribute to that experience, right? And if we don't take a look at it, and I think there's a lot of times that folks get into that cycle of creating the same thing over and over and over again. And it becomes like the Groundhog Day, right? Like that experience where it's like, I'm stuck in this trauma. I'm stuck in this victimhood. I'm stuck in this reality that I can't seem to dig myself out of. And I think you hit the nose on the head really well when you said it requires attention. It requires us going deeper into it. And it requires us, and especially for, we're having this conversation on the back of 2020, right? And 2020, if you did not have your stuff taken care of, 2020 exposed every single one of it, right? Like it was like massive, like bulldozer, you're going to experience that. And I think that's what, this time has been for a lot of people, including myself, is just like looking at the unresolved business that we haven't taken care of. And I think collectively as a society, we are raising the vibrations, and the work that we've done in this last year, is nothing short of a miracle of the work that everyone has been doing. And I know and trust that it is here to serve us in our highest and greatest good.
Yeah. So I want to just like add to what we're saying, because I don't want people to think that we're saying you're causing all your problems.
No.
What I think we're both trying to say is we can't control what other people say, do, react to. We can't control what other people's actions. We can't control that. That was the hardest lesson for me in my entire life, that I could not control my son taking his life. I mean, it still brings tears back to my eyes 10 plus years later. It's like, if I could have controlled his actions, he would still be here today, but I couldn't control that. But what I could control, and what I could venture into and dip my toes into, was my response to that. And how am I going to use any event in my life? How am I going to respond? Both of us are Jack Canfield students. It's the E+R=O formula. Like the first day that I went to One Day to Greatness, which was, I don't know, 7 years after my son's transition, I heard him say the E+R=O, event plus your response equals your outcome, which is how you want to live your life. That was the biggest aha that I had since my son's transition, because that's what I did when I was laying on his grave. I took a different response. So where I didn't have to continue to live in the pain, but I moved through the pain. So where I could be a teacher, an inspiration, an example of how you can empower yourself to make different choices. In 2020, I wrote 3 international best-selling books. 3 in 2020. Wow. I could have chosen to just, curl up in my bed on the day that we said no more traveling. You're stuck in your apartment, or I could do what I did, is continue to exercise, continue to take care of my physical, mental, and emotional health, so where I could continue to be of service in the world.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, and I think you're right. I think we need to just make sure that everything that we are doing, we have an option. We have a choice, right? Mm-hmm. To make a choice of how we're responding versus reacting. And things are going to be shown to us, and there's going to be things that we disagree with. There's going to be things that we don't understand. There's going to be things that knock us to our core. And just like you said, like that E+R=O, it's like, how am I showing up, and how am I responding and reacting to this? Because that is such a game changer. That's the only thing I truly believe that's the only thing we can control, is that how we show up, and how do we make the best of it? And you're right. And we may not be able to see that gift in it for years later. Right.
Yeah. And even the people that are avoiding avoiding whatever experience that they had that they don't want to face. It's showing up in your weight. It's showing up in your response to your employees. It's showing up. Are you reactive? Are you explosive? Are you withdrawn? Are you feeling depressed or anxiety or any of those things that we're trying to avoid? Emotions are just motions, or is energy in motion. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And so just like feeling exhilarated or really excited, it's the opposite end. So you don't constantly feel ecstatic about everything.
Right.
It just isn't. It's just
Yeah.
emotions in motion, and so allow those emotions to flow through you and acknowledge them, because the more you avoid them, the more it has control over you.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I always think of it, our emotions are our internal guidance system. All it
Mhm.
is giving us information about our circumstances, giving us information about what's happening, right? So if we use it as a ally versus an
Mhm.
enemy,
Right.
we can use that as indication. We can use that as, support for us, to help
Right.
us through. So I love that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, for our listeners that are listening today, and I know we don't have much more time today, but what tool, strategy, technique, what nugget would you give a listener, and no matter where they're at in their path, going through this kind of transformational process and transformational journey that they're on? What was something that was helpful for you, that was kind of a game changer, besides the, you know, um,
Mhm.
taking the ownership and showing how we show up? But what's something else that you can add to that for them?
So it's the one thing that I tell everybody. It's the grief prescription. It's the 3 Bs. Be in the moment. Don't look too far out into the future, and don't look too far out into the past, because the only thing that you have right now is the moment. And the more you look out into the future, the more you're creating limiting stories based on the fear that you're sitting in right now. So only be in the moment. Breathe, consciously breathe, consciously take effort in breathing deeply. So it's the 4 squared that I talk about. It's breathe into the count of 4, hold it to the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, and hold it to the count of 4. And do that 4 times in the row. You can do that in a meeting. You can do that at home. You can do that with your eyes closed. You can do that at a red light.
I
You can
love
do
it.
that as someone tries cutting you off in traffic. And then the third is believe. Believe that this moment and how you're feeling right now at this very moment is not always going to be. Just believe that you can get through it, and believe that there's a higher power, that you are connected to a much larger universe, that we're all energy and we're all
Yeah,
connected, and we can make it through that. And finally, there's that. And finally, invest in your healing. Feel your feelings.
yeah.
Um, and there's many ways to do that. I teach many ways. I work with clients one-on-one. And I'm not the only one. There are many, many modalities out there that are natural, that've been around for 5,000 plus years. There's many ways to move through your healing journey. Just
I
take the
love it.
step.
Yes, I will second that. Take the step, and I love that, your 3 Bs. So I'm gonna invite people to connect with you. Can you just share with us what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Go to my website at CathleenElle.com. So it's CathleenElle.com. My website has the 3 books. They have all the programs. I have a new online virtual program. All of my social media. There's definitely social media to connect with me. And the one thing on my website is Shattered Together: A Mother's Journey from Grief to Belief. And it's a guide that helps you through any kind of journey you might be going through.
I love it. Okay, so we will be putting that information down in the show notes. So make sure that you go visit those. Thank you so much for being here, and being a warrior, right? Just being like choosing to not give up. So thank you for being the light in the world and giving other people permission to be the light in the world as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Teri. Thank you.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithteri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.